There are places on this planet that still defy our understanding, places where modern science must surrender, at least for a moment, before the magnitude of the unknown. The Brazilian Amazon holds one of those places. A cave so vast, so ancient, and so full of secrets that when the first modern explorers entered it, they were paralyzed by what they found. It was not what anyone expected, and what they discovered changed forever what we thought we knew about the history of human beings in South America. Leave your like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. In the state of Para, in the heart of Brazil, there is a cave system known as Caverna do Marauaga, and further south in the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, the Gruta do Lago Azul system. But none of these, with all their beauty, prepared the scientific world for the discovery that would take place in the Serra da Bodoquena and in the underground complexes of the Altamira region, in Para. It was here, in a remote area accessible only after days of river navigation and hikes through dense jungle, that speleologists from the Brazilian Institute of Speleology documented one of the most disturbing finds of recent decades. The cave in question, whose access was officially registered in the 1990s, although accounts from indigenous communities had mentioned it long before, is part of a karst system of extraordinary dimensions. Karst is a type of geological landscape formed by the slow dissolution of soluble rocks such as limestone or dolomite, and in the Amazon this process has been creating underground labyrinths of a difficult-to-imagine scale for millions of years. What the explorers found upon descending was not simply a cave, it was a separate world. The Altamira Itaituba speleological system, identified and partially mapped by Brazilian researchers linked to the Brazilian Society of Speleology, contains more than 40 kilometers of documented galleries, although specialists suspect the real system is considerably larger. The first expeditions that attempted to map the interior encountered underground rivers with strong currents, chambers with ceilings more than 80 meters high, and stalagmite and stalactite formations reaching sizes never before recorded in Latin America. All of that was astonishing, but it was not what was unexpected. What no one had anticipated was on the walls. During the archaeological reconnaissance expedition that accompanied the speleologists, researchers from the Museo Paraense Emilio Goeldi discovered rock art, not a few scattered marks. We are talking about entire panels of paintings and engravings covering dozens of meters of rock, in sections of the cave so deep and difficult to access that no one could have reached them without profound knowledge of the terrain. The figures depicted animals now extinct, mastodons, megatheria, glyptodonts, creatures of the American megafauna that disappeared between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. This was not art from a few centuries ago. It was art from before the end of the Pleistocene. The carbon-14 dating of organic material associated with some of the paintings, as well as the analysis of pigments using X-ray fluorescence techniques, placed the antiquity of at least part of the representations in a range of between 9,000 and 11,000 years before the present. This situated the authors of those paintings at a moment when the great American mammals were still roaming the continent, or had just disappeared. The artists who painted those walls had seen those animals. Perhaps they had hunted them. Perhaps they had venerated them. The discovery opened a box of questions that Amazonian archaeology has spent decades trying to answer. For a long time, the dominant view among Western historians was that the Amazon had always been a region of small nomadic cultures, human groups that lived in the jungle without leaving lasting traces. This view was forcefully challenged from the 1990s onward, when researchers such as Anna Roosevelt of the University of Illinois in Chicago and later Michael Heckenberger of the University of Florida began to document evidence of sedentary, complex, and numerous populations in the Amazon basin. Anna Roosevelt, in her excavations at Caverna da Pedra Pintada, also in the state of Para, had found in 1,996 evidence of human occupation dating back 11,200 years, along with faunal remains, seeds of edible plants, and stone tools. Her work was revolutionary because it demonstrated that the first inhabitants of the Amazon were not simple transient gatherers, but communities that knew their environment profoundly and had developed a sustained relationship with it over millennia. The caves of the Amazon, far from being simple accidental shelters, were spaces of deep cultural significance. Leave your like, subscribe, and share. What makes the find in the Altamira karst system so disturbing is not only the antiquity of the art, it is the deliberate choice of location. To reach the sections where the most elaborate panels were found, the prehistoric artists had to descend several hundred meters into the interior of the cave, cross underground streams, and navigate in absolute darkness. They did not carry electric flashlights. They carried resin torches, probably of copal or local plant resins, whose carbonized residues were found in small natural crevices of the rock at regular intervals, as if they had marked the path. That means that those human beings of 10,000 years ago planned the expedition. They prepared the lighting material. They selected the pigments, which included iron oxides for the reds and yellows, charcoal for the blacks, and in some cases white clays of local origin. And then they went into the bowels of the earth to leave a record, a message that no one else would see for thousands of years. Researchers from the Museo Goeldi, in collaboration with specialists from the National Center for Research and Conservation of Caves of Brazil, also documented in these galleries something that further amplified the mystery: geometric marks. Alongside the representations of extinct animals, there are series of dots, parallel lines, spirals, and shapes that do not represent any recognizable object. The debate about the meaning of this abstract art has been active in world archaeology for decades. Some researchers, such as David Lewis Williams of the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, have proposed that these geometric forms, called phosphenes, correspond to images that the human brain generates in altered states of consciousness, whether through sensory deprivation, prolonged fasting, or the use of psychoactive substances. If that hypothesis is correct, and there is neurological evidence that supports it, then the caves were not just art galleries. They were ritual spaces, places where the shamans or equivalent figures of those communities entered into states of trance and represented on the walls the visions they experienced. The total darkness of the interior of the cave, the sound of the underground river, the constant cold, the sensation of absolute isolation from the outside world, all of that would create the perfect conditions for the alteration of perception. But rock art was not the only unexpected find. The speleologists also found, in a side chamber about 2 kilometers from the main entrance, an accumulation of bones. Not human bones, at least not in their majority. They were mainly animal bones, but their arrangement was not random. They were grouped, some partially covered by sediment, but others in a position suggesting intentional deposition. Among them were bones of tapir, peccary, and a species of deer, and mixed in with them, fragments of coarse but deliberate ceramics. Amazonian ceramics has a long and complex history. The oldest datings of ceramics in South America point to the region of the mouth of the Amazon, with evidence going back more than 7,000 years at the Taparina site, also in the state of Para, studied precisely by Anna Roosevelt. The presence of ceramics in such an inaccessible cave, associated with faunal remains, reinforced the hypothesis that this place had been used continuously for thousands of years, not as an emergency shelter, but as a sacred or ceremonial space of periodic visitation. The ecosystem inside the cave also surprised the researchers. Tropical caves are biologically rich environments, and the Altamira system is no exception. The biologist who accompanied the expedition documented several species of blind fish adapted to permanent darkness, arachnids of unknown genera, and colonies of bats of at least 6 different species. Some of these bats are frugivorous and play a crucial role in the regeneration of the surrounding jungle. Their nocturnal flight routes connect the cave with points in the jungle tens of kilometers away, carrying seeds in their digestive system. In a certain sense, the cave is an invisible ecological heart that beats beneath the surface of the Amazon. The protection of these systems is one of the most urgent challenges facing Brazil. The advance of deforestation in the state of Para and in the karst regions of Mato Grosso do Sul does not only destroy the visible jungle, it destroys the plant cover that protects the limestone rocks, accelerates erosion, and can collapse entire galleries. The National Center for Research and Conservation of Caves, known as CKV, dependent on the Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation, has documented that Brazil possesses more than 21,000 registered natural cavities, and it is estimated that the real number could exceed 100,000. Many of them are under direct threat. The international scientific community began to pay greater attention to these caves after research published in journals such as the Journal of Archaeological Science and Latin American Antiquity began to accumulate evidence of the cultural complexity of the first inhabitants of the Amazon. The old paradigm of the Amazon as a marginal region for prehistoric human development is being dismantled piece by piece. The caves are one of those pieces, and perhaps the most unsettling one. Because there is something in the image of a human being from 11,000 years ago descending into the womb of the earth, lighting their torch, crossing an underground river in the darkness and painting on the rock the image of a giant animal they have just seen die, that forces us to look at ourselves in a different way. Not as modern and superior beings looking back at our primitive ancestors, but as the last link in a chain of consciousness and meaning that has spent tens of thousands of years trying to leave a mark on the world. That is what the explorers found in the cave of the Amazon. Not just art, not just bones. They found the echo of a humanity that already knew that time passes, that animals disappear, and that someone, at some future moment, should know it. Leave your like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.